So this week is Parshas Kiseitze, and Parshas Kiseitze has many mitzvahs. So out of the huge variety, I chose one mitzvah which is a fascinating sugya, and one that's nagei halacha l'maaseh. Lo yisashech lo ochichu neshech kesef neshech hoicha neshech kol dovar asher yishach. Bava mitzvah ayin heyu mitbeis Chazal learn from this posuk. Neshech kol dovar afilu dibur. And that is the Isser of Ribis devorim. When you take a loan, you cannot pay more than you receive. That's Ribis. Even Ribis devorim is also. Loi hoyorul lahagdim lo shalom, asur lahagdim lo shalom. If you weren't used to say good morning to a friend, and you're going to start saying good morning because he gave you a loan, that's Ribis devorim. So that Gemara is at the end of Weiss and Eshechayin Hayom Beis. It's also in the Rambam, Perek Yaloch Yud Beis, Hilchas Malva Veloivim, Shulchan Aruch Yeridei Kuf Samach Siv Yud Aleph. And there's a machlokes to Shorim and Achonim whether this of Ribis Devorim is Manatoira or only Miderabonam. Chuvas Rivash Shavsim Akuf Mem Zayin Mashma that it's an Issa Dioraisa. That is also clear on the Smag Sefer Mitzvahs God Lo Tasa Kuf Tzadek Aleph and Toisvis, Kedushin, Ches, Omud, Beis. On the other hand, Chochma Sodom, Kuf Lamed Aleph, Klal Kuf Lamed Aleph, Sifut Aleph maintains, Ribis Vorim is in the Rabbonin. It's not a drosha, it's just an asmachta. Kach Mavur B'divra Rank Subis, Tet Zainu Med Beis in the Dapim of the Rif. Because the Ran says there is no Issa Dioraisa by Ribis Pochas Meshav Pruta, but it's not different than Ribis Vorim, so it should be an Issa Derabonim. We learn from the Ran that Ribis Devorim is an Issa Derabonim. The same we find in Sefer HaTrumis, Shar Mem Vov, Chela Gemel, Sif Yud Gemel, the Mabit in Kiryat Sefer Perikei Malva Veloivim. So this is a big machlokes Rishonim and Achronim. Is it the Urais or is it the Rabbonim? But everybody agrees it's Osur. And what is the example of Ribis Devorim? Lo haya ragil lagdim lo shalom, lo yagdim lo shalom. And that is why most people today, when they get a loan, they just don't say thank you. And it's a very strange feeling. I'm so full of a korsa toiv. This person did me such a huge favor. He gives me a loan without interest. He trusts me. But I can't say thank you. So some people, instead of saying thank you, say Tizkal HaMitzvahs. Reb Shlomo Zalman comments, Mincha Shloim Chelek Aleph Simach of Zayin, that's just worse. Because Tizkal HaMitzvahs is a bracha. And a bracha is something far more substantial than just thank you. Reb Shlomo Zalman actually wants the taina that the entire Aveda, the entire Isser, is only giving a bracha. Lo yakdim lo shalom. What does that mean? So in modern Israel, shalom is just like good morning, good evening, good afternoon, how do you do? But when Chazal say, lo yagdem lo shalom, that is to give a bracha. Lo motzu HaKadosh Baruch Hu kli machzek bracha leYisrael el HaShalom. That is the greatest blessing. So Rabbi Shimon Zalman says maybe the entire Isser is only to say Tizkal HaMitzvahs, because Tizkal HaMitzvahs is a bracha. Rabbi Shimon Zalman actually in Chelek Aleph, in the tshuva I mentioned, wants to say, no problem saying thank you. But he retracts in Chelik Beis and Samaches because he saw in Shulchan Aruch Harav and Hilchas Halvo Asif Teh, Shulchan Aruch Harav clearly says She also lahoidos. And if Reb Shimon Zalman retracted because of Shulchan Aruch Harav, I wonder why didn't he retract because of the Rambam? The Rambam, hey Yud Bey, says lo yoim aloi divrei shevach v'kilusin. Shevach v'kilusin is not a bracha; it's just a compliment. So the Rambam clearly says not only a bracha is the prohibition, shevach v'kilusin as well. So shevach v'kilusin is somewhat more than thank you. But if Rabbi Shimon Zalman had to have him and only a bracha is also, then the Rambam clearly says not only a bracha. My humble opinion is there is no problem at all to say thank you. But I want to make a few introductions before I explain my opinion. The Beis Yosef and Kus Samach quotes the Agos Mordechai, Bova Metzia Tov Mem Aleph. A strange psat. If the loive is machzik toive la malva, and the malva is machzik toive to the loive as well, then there's no problem. What does he mean? The loiva machzik toiva lemalva. He says thank you. And the malva does the same. What does the malva have to be machzik toiva? The loiva didn't do him a favor. So what does it mean? If it's reciprocal, if the loiva does and the malva does as well, then there is no isur. 3 different interpretations. The Bach, gewaltige Chiddush. So the Bach says, Reuven gave a loan to Shimon. Shimon promises, whenever you need, I will do a favor. I'll give you a job. I'll help you marry off your kids. That's a problem of Ribis. Then the Malva needs to respond and say, oh, if you will do me a favor, I promise I'll do you a favor as well. So it's favor for favor, and that neutralizes the Ribis. So it's not the loiva doing a favor for the malva because he gave him a loan, but rather the loiva is going to do the malva a favor, and the malva will do the same similar favor to the loiva. So that's not Ribis. And the Bach clearly says, even if the malva doesn't really intend to do him any favor, he just needs to say so, it shouldn't be Ribis. That's a big chiddush. Why would that take away the issue of Ribis? After all, the reason the loiva promised to do a favor is because of the loan. And why does that change when the malva responds and says, oh, I'll make you happy as well? But that's the Bach. Birke Yosef in Shiur Brocha quotes the Mahari Kastel, Shalas Shuvas Oele Yankov, Simekuf Chavav. He gives 2 different interpretations to this Mordechai quoted in the Beis Yosef. Number 1, the Isser is only as long as the loan is still biyad aloiva. But when the loiva comes to pay back that loan, he could say thank you. There is no longer a din of Isser Ribis. And that is what the Mordechai means. The malva is machzik toiv as well. The loiva says thank you for getting the loan. The malva says thank you that you paid the loan, not to be taken for granted. Sometimes it takes years till a loan is repaid, and sometimes loans are never paid. So the loiva thanks the malva for giving him the loan. The malva thanks the loiva for paying the loan. And b'shas paroin, there no longer is an esav ribis devorim. That's one pshat. But it's not in the words. The other pshat is somewhat unclear. My interpretation of the Mordechai, and I think that is what the Marikash says in a second pshat, is this. To me, it is very unreasonable that a person gets a loan and he cannot say thank you. Being appreciative, hakoras atoiv, is so fundamental in Torah and in Musar. I don't want to give a Musa Shmus right now, but it's one of the most fundamental midos is hakoras atoiv. The Ramban says when Moshe Rabbeinu gives Musa to Klal Yisrael, Am noval v'loy chacham, hal Hashem tigmul ozois, halahu uvicho konecha u'oscho v'yechonecha. The Ramban says, Am noval she'enoi makir toiva. So, a person cannot say thank you for a favor another man gave him a loan. Is it a mitzvah to be nasty and rude when somebody does you a favor? Lanias daite, there's no problem in saying thank you. The essence of Ribis is giving back more than you received. You got a $100 loan, you cannot pay $110. You cannot give back more than you receive. And this is not only a moment. Neshech kol oichel, toivis hanoah. But the substantial idea, the fundamental idea is you're giving back more than you received. When a person says thank you, that is just courtesy. It is not perceived by the lender as getting back more than he gave. I think the Yisr is only going above and beyond fundamental, basic courtesy. So if Reuven gave Shimon a loan, and Shimon calls Reuven's wife or his family and he says, I want to thank you, your husband, your brother, was so outstanding. He's such a great mensch. So I feel I need to call you and thank you. When Reuven is going to get home, his wife is going to tell him, I got such a beautiful phone call today. Shimon thinks so highly of you. That's Ribis Devorim, because that is beyond what is normally expected. That's beyond basic courtesy or nimus ba'alma. But when Reuven gives Shimon a loan and Shimon says thank you, Reuven won't call his wife excited. You wouldn't believe this. I gave Shimon a loan and what did he do? He said thank you. So it all depends on social norms. In our modern day and age, when a person does the slightest effort, you're expected to say thank you. You're waiting in line in the bank or at a bus stop. The person in front of you sees you have a white beard, you're an elderly person. So he steps aside and he lets you go before him. You say thank you. You want to write a check. Your pen isn't writing. Person next to you gives you a pen for 5 seconds. You say thank you. You dropped a penny. The boy next to you stoops down and picks it up and gives it. You say thank you. You're expected to say thank you for the slightest effort. So if you get a loan, you can't say thank you. That is not perceived as additional payment. And the lender doesn't feel, wow, I gave him a loan. And besides getting back the loan, I got a blessing. You cannot go beyond the basic courtesy. But nimus ba'alma is not Ribis Devorim. To me, this is so poshut and so clear. Divrei shevach v'kilusin is beyond just thank you. When the Shulchan Aruch says loy lehoidos, it is maybe in the world of once upon a time, hundreds of years ago, there were different nimusim. But to me it is clear. Just being basically nice. You say thank you for everything. You're not even saying thank you for the money. You're saying thank you for the time you dedicated. Just for being nice. Just for helping you out. Just for spending 5 minutes with you, you say thank you. So to me, there's no problem whatsoever saying thank you when you get a loan or when you pay the loan. But don't go overboard. Don't be overly thankful. So if the loiva waits 6 o'clock in the morning when he knows the malva leaves his house and he waits outside the door and he said, I want to once again thank you for the loan you gave me a month ago. It was so helpful. That is an issa of Ribis Devorim. Because that is beyond the norm. That is Ribis Devorim. Because Reuven will call his wife. You didn't believe it. When I went out of the house 6 o'clock in the morning, Shimon was right down there waiting for me in the snow and the rain. And he just waited to say thank you. He was the malva is so moved. That's a Ribis Devorim. But just basically saying thank you is no problem at all. To me, this is poshet betachlis, but I always feel more comfortable when I'm a chadash yesod and halacha to find sources, and I think that is the pshat in the Oel Yankav Maharikash. So when the loiva is machzik toiva la malva, and the malva keneged says machzik toiva la loiva, that proves that it's just courtesy. That proves it's just nimus. And that is derech ha'olam. So Ploini did a favor for Almoini. Almoini says, thank you. Ploini says, you're welcome. So you're welcome and thank you. Those are niceties. That's just basic courtesy. That is not considered the Ribis Devorim. And that is what the Mordechai means. If the loiv is machzik toiva and the malv is machzik toiva, the borrower thanks the lender thanks the borrower. Why does the lender need to thank the borrower? For what? For nothing. For saying thank you. Pliny says thank you. Almoini responds, you're welcome. Therefore, that is not considered Ribis Devorim. There's a big machloikas Shach and Taz regarding Toivis Hanoah Beribis. Sif Chov Gimel Semakuf Samach. I think the Ramo says, if Reuven lends money to Shimon, Reuven can't say, I'm giving you a loan, but I want you to give me a job. even though he's going to work for that job. He's not getting a free lunch. He's not getting a gift. But that is still toivus and that's ribis. So Reuven can't give a loan to Shimon and ask Shimon, could you please employ me? Give me a job. That's toivus and ribis devorim. The Taz disagrees. And the Taz says, Alocha meforeshes simen kuf ayin beis siv daled. Reuven could give a loan to Shimon and stipulate, I want you to sell me the house. I know you have a house to sell. I want to buy it. You want to sell a car? I'm giving you a loan, but sell me your car. And that's permitted. Why would that be different than asking you to employ me? The Shach says two different terutzim, and both are tzorchim. The first teretz of the Shach is, selling the house is a house on which the lender already has a lien on. He has a lien on that house. He has a shiur, and therefore he could demand, okay, I'll give you a loan, but on the condition you sell me the house on which I already have a lien. What's the difference? Why would that make a difference? After all, you're asking for a favor, and you're giving him a loan on the condition that he sells you the house. Why would that be different than giving you a job? Second teretz of the Shach is unclear. Shach says there's a difference between selling a house and getting a job. When he sells me the house, I'm paying the full price. So that's not ribis. Why is a job different? He pays me a salary, but I am going to work for him in a fair and square way. So what's the difference? It's not clear. The Chavas Das has a totally novel interpretation, and he says, the dinas of Mekufayim Beis is, I lend you money on the condition that if I decide to buy your house, that instead of a loan, this money will be a down payment. So in that case, if I decide to buy the house, it was never a loan. It was paying for the house. That is why it can't be ribis. You need to be a ilui to give such a pshat, but it's not in the Mishmoah Saloshan of the Shulchan Aruch or the Rishonim, which the Beis Yosef quotes as the basis of this halach. My understanding would be the same yesod that I said before. We're not dealing with ribis mamoin, but with something similar to ribis devorim. And ribis devorim is all about perception, about the way people see it. So when a person wants to buy a house, usually he's not in desperation. He's looking for a house. It could be this house, it could be that house, it could be another. Usually there's a market. But a person doesn't have a job, he is always desperate. Because the worker needs to work to supply for his family. And if he doesn't work, he has no income. In both cases, it's not monetary gain. I'm paying the full price for the house the borrower is going to sell me. I am going to work for the salary the borrower is going to pay me. But the difference is in perception. When I want to buy a house, I don't have an outstanding akoras atoiv to the person that sold me the house. The house is for sale. I could buy elsewhere a different house, but people usually are very makatoiva to their employer. It's a different type of relationship. It's a different way people see things. From the monetary point of view, they're both the same. But this is perceived as a huge favor, and this is not perceived as a favor. And that is why this would be ribis, me'ein ribis devorim, and that would not be me'ein ribis devorim. Kach nera lani esdaiti. So this is a big chiddush in halacha. To me, it's not a chiddush at all, but I know whenever I say this, and this is my psak halacha lamaisa. You got a loan, be a mensch and say thank you, and that is not considered ribis devorim. 170 years ago, 70 years ago, Tov Reishud Beis. Shalas Etshuvas Imre Eish was printed first time. The Imre Eish was the greatest Talmud of the Chassam Sofer. I'm an anikel of the Imre Eish. And sometimes people ask me, how do you dare to say the Imre Eish was the greatest Talmud of the Chassam Sofer? The Chassam Sofer had hundreds of Talmidim. Most of the Gedolim in Galicia, Hungary, one generation after the Chassam Sofer was Talmidim. The Maram Shik, the Ksav Sofer, great Gedolim, the Machne Chaim, the Kol Arya. But I insist, Imre Eish was the greatest of them. Recently I saw in Droshes Ksav Sofer a Hesped, and the Ksav Sofer is Masbed, the Imre Eish, Rameirash, and he says, Maramash was the greatest of my father's Talmidim. So I was Machavan to the Ksav Sofer. Anyway, after the Ptir of the Imre Eish, his sons printed a Sefer, Reb Menachem and Reb Yehuda Ash. And at the start of the Sefer, the beginning of the Sefer, there's a thank you bracha for a person that lent us money to print the Sefer. Erech Shai, Reb Shlomo Yehuda Tabak, was one of the Gedolei Ador. I'm a great admirer of the Erech Shai. His shuvas are called shuvas Churas Shai, Sfor Meshulchan Aruch, Erech Shai, Shai is Rosh HaTov, Shlomo Yehuda. He was the Av Beis Din and Sigit. And in Madurat Inyon Semakuf Samach, he attacks the children of Maram Mash, and he says they were over on Ribis Devorim. You got a loan, and you write a recognition in the Sefer, and you give him a brocha, that's Ribis Devorim. How could you do that? Interesting. Reb Menachem Mash, his son, Reb Tzalal, an anikel of the Imre Eish, wrote a kuntas to be miyashev that it's not Ribis Devorim. I haven't seen that kuntas for 100 years. I don't even remember what's in it. But I do remember I was not oppressed when I read it. So it's a big kasha. Same story happened 150 years later. Tzitz Eliezer, Rav Alderberg, Chelik Tesem et Tesvav, got a gift, a sefer from Rabbi Binyamin Zilber. Rabbi Binyamin Zilber was known in Bnei Brak as Rabbi Binyamin Atzadik. He was a Godel Yisrael. He wrote many Sforim. And he sent a sefer to Rav Alderberg, and Rav Alderberg writes him, you're over on Ribis Devarim. I saw a thank you, recognition, a dedication to a person that gave you a loan. That's Ribis Devarim. Well, Avi Ezri, Chelek Aleph, Arav Shach, Chelek Aleph Agdum Beis, also writes a thank you for a person that lent him money to print the sefer. Okay. So the same story happens again and again. History repeats itself. Rabbi Binyamin Zilber, Moron Arav Shach, going back 170 years, Imre Eish. But the most important source is Knesses Agdoila 500 years ago. And the Haggadah, so Knesses Agdoila Ben Benisti, he writes a thank you and a brocha for a person that lent him money. So Tzorech Liyashiv. Reb Moshe deals with this question. I don't think Reb Moshe brings any of the sources that I mentioned. But Yoredeya, Chelek Aleph, Siman Pei, the Igros Moshe writes, you cannot say thank you, you cannot give a brocha, but you could just state the fact. This person lent me money. V'yes borach min hashamayim. That's a fact. The Kodesh Baruch Hu will bless him. I'm such a great admirer of Reb Moshe, but I can't agree to this tshuva. It's all a matter of interpretation and perception. You're not telling a story. When you write a dedication in recognition of a person that lent you money, and you say, Yisborach min hashamayim, that's a brocha. That's not a sipur devorim ba'alma. You're not telling a story. You're benching the person. That is the way people understand it. That's the interpretation. So what is the teretz? I want to say three things. Number one, maybe, we learn from the posuk, Neshech kol dovor asher yishach afilu dvorim. And who says ksiva kedibur? Maybe ksiva is lav kedibur. The yisr is only dvorim. No, I'm not happy with this teretz. Meirevitz min haTorah ula yesh mokoim. Gzeis hakosav neshech kol dovar afilu dovar dibur. If it's midrabanan, definitely not reasonable to machalak between ksav and balpeh. What's the difference? Even if it's min haTorah, not misdavar. It's a remez. Kol dovar. Dovar is b'ksav u'bebalpeh. Number two. Maybe the answer is only when there is a direct interaction between the loiva and the malva, between the lender and the borrower. He says thank you to him. to him personally, in a direct interaction between the two. So a person got a loan to print a sefer. Is he entitled when he says at Rosh Shabbos afternoon, I really want to take this opportunity to thank Moshe Yankel for giving me a loan? He's not addressing Moshe Yankel. Maybe he's not even in the crowd in shul. Would that be permissible? Maybe. After all, you're making him happy. You're giving him something, direct or indirect. Maybe, but not enough reasonable. Masha Nerelani is daiti, the same yisod I said twice in the past 20 minutes. Anything that is basic courtesy is not Ribis Devorim. Ribis Devorim is only when you go beyond what is normally expected. So I really think if a person gave you a loan, don't give him a full page dedication. Don't thank him with superlatives. Don't exaggerate. So all the sources I quoted are tsanua, are modest. Pliny gave us a loan to print the Sefer Yisborach Min HaShamayim. If you won't give him any recognition, that's being rude. That's a lack of a koras hatov. Just being nice and what is expected as fundamental courtesy is not defined as Ribis Devorim. But if it's anything Pliny the lender will be proud of, and he'll come home and he'll be overwhelmed and he'll talk about it, that is when we touch upon the Isser of Ribis Devorim, Kach Nerelan Ezdati. So, to many this seems to be a great Chiddush. To me it seems to be a Dover Poshut. And Kach Nerelan Ezdati. And after all, it's Maaser Rav. We're dealing with great Gedolim, especially the Knesset Gedolim. And I don't see any other reasonable teretz, only the message I try to convey in today's shiur. Ki seitze lemalcham alavecha. Whatever we learn, Elul is in the spirit of Elul. The Chofetz Chaim, as many other Sifrei Mishnah and Sifrei Chasidus say, this malchama is not only a malchama between armies, warriors, nations. It's the greatest malchama of all, Malchemes HaYetzer. And why is that the greatest malchama? The Chovos HaLevavos tells a story in Shai Yichud HaMaaseh, Perek Hey. A general, a warrior, came home from the battlefield victorious. Thousands of people came out to cheer, to applaud. And a chassid approached the general and he said, you think you're coming back from a big battle? No, that was a minor battle. The big battle is still before you. And that's the battle with your Yetzer Hara. And why is that the greatest of all battles? In the history of warfare, in the very nature of warfare, some wars are very short. Some wars take very long. Germany conquered Poland, the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, in 30 days. Israel vanquished 3 Arab armies in the 6-day war in 6 days. It was miraculous, Nissen. America fought in Afghanistan 20 years. There are long wars and short wars. But by the nature of warfare, when it's all over and the smoke clears, there's a winner and a loser. One side is victorious and the other is broken and vanquished. It happened in the 6-day war. It happened between the Nazis and Poland. And in these very days, America is leaving Afghanistan, and it's quite clear who's the winner and who's the loser. That's the nature of warfare. Malchemes HaYetzer is different. It's a never-ending war. Until the last moment, you could never know who's the winner and who's the loser. Masechet Tovos Perek Deis Mishnah Daled. Al Tama Biyatzim Chod Yoy Moischo Shara Yoichel Ein Koyen Godel Shemesh Bekune Gedol Lishmoinem Shono Ula Besof Naaset Tzedoki. Could take decades, and you never know. Person thinks, I destroyed my Yetzer Hara, I broke him. And then in one moment, he's back with a vengeance, full blast, and he overcomes you, and you're down and out. It happened to Yochanan Kohen Gadol. And that is why Chazal teaches in Shabbos Pei Gimel, You cannot know till the last moment. Learn Torah when you're dying, with your last living breath. That is why this is the greatest war. And maybe that is one of the reasons we say Perek Chav Zayin and Tehillim every day, Erul Tishrei. L'David Hashem Orevi Yishit. Im tachna alai machana, o yiru libi, im tokom alai machoma, bezois ani buteach, zois ha-Torah odom ki yomes b'yoel, the Medrash says. Filu b'shas moisa yasik b'Torah. What gives us confidence? Bezois ani buteach, zois ha-Torah odom ki yomes b'yoel. This is the great Melchama, and the Torah promises, Ki seitze lemelchama lavecha, unason Hashem elokecha b'yodecha. We don't have the power to overcome the Yetzer Hara. It is only Siyata Dishmaya. The Gemara in Kedushin Daf Lamed says, Yetzer shel Odom es gaber ora b'chol yoim. B'chol yoim. Ve'ela moreh HaKadosh Baruch Hu azroi eina yochaloi. It is only with Siyata Dishmaya. It is only with the help of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu does help. Ki seitze lemelchama lavecha. You just need to go out to fight. In a sonoi Hashem Elokecha biyodecha, and that is the promise. Dear brothers and friends, Im lo yachshav Masai, now is the time. It's Elul. Now is the time. We need to try to fight the Yetzer Hara. We need to identify the foe. The problem is, most of us don't identify our enemy. We live at peace with the Yetzer Hara. He seems to be the best of friends. He makes us happy every day. No. He's not friend, he's foe. That's enemy fire. He's an enemy. And if you wage war, it's a difficult war, but you will have Siyata Dishmaya. Ki seitze lemelchama lavecha nason Hashem elokecha biyodecha im lo yachshav Masai. Let us all go out to the battlefield, and with Siyata Dishmaya, we will be victorious. We should all have a Sholat Tova Mesuka Shnaz Geula v'Yeshua. We should be Mavasa B'Seiros Tovos. Have a beautiful Shabbos.